Hello and welcome to this webinar, Blended Learning in Primary Schools in Microsoft Teams with Cornerstone Academy Trust. So I'm going to just start off by introducing who's on the call today. So we've got Lloyd Tooton, he's our Cloud Design Box trainer and consultant. We've got Darren Hemming, our operations manager, and our guest today from Cornerstone Academy Trust, we've got David James, who's head of education, and Anthony Lees, who's the deputy head of West Cliss Community Primary School. So hello everyone, thanks for joining us today.
Good afternoon.
Great to be here.
So just a quick overview of the agenda today. So we're going to tell you a bit about Cloud Design Box and what we do. We're then going to introduce our guests from Cornerstone Academy Trust. We're going to look at some of the benefits and some demos of the great things they've been doing there to influence teacher learning using Microsoft 365. If we have time, we might do another demo of Teams and we'll have some questions and answers at the end. So there is a question and answers box at the top right. And if you want to ask any questions throughout, please feel free to type them into the box. And we'll ask them either during the session or we'll come to them at the end. So a bit about Cloud Design Box. So we're a team of education, Teams and SharePoint experts. We support over 240 schools across the UK and abroad. And some of the extra value that we bring to Office 365 and Teams is we create a SharePoint intranet to communicate with the whole organisation, publish resources to large groups of people. We create centralized resource areas, so to save teacher time by reusing your resources across all of your class teams. We create student folders, analytics, collaboration. There's a big list of features there that we add. But one of the main things is we focus on user adoption, so getting SharePoint and Teams used really well within the school. And that includes training, so we create we put on staff training workshops. We've got a self-service training portal, and we also track user adoption with surveys, report back to the school how it's going. So I'm now going to hand over to my colleague Darren, who's going to introduce Cornerstone Academy Trust and hopefully have some interesting demos from them and ask some interesting questions. And again, feel free to get involved using the question and answers panel.
Thanks, Tony. Anthony, David, welcome this afternoon.
Thank you,
Darren. Great to be here.
Yeah, so obviously as a trust, Cornerstone looks after, manages, is several schools. You've got a couple of schools in the mix. As you're working with Office 365, Microsoft 365, Teams, SharePoint, what particular approaches have you used from a trust perspective to kind of bring everything together?
Well, yeah. Well, as you say, we're we are a relatively small multi-academy trust, and for the last since I've been there 18 years, we have been using Microsoft through all of its guises. Windows, it was on Windows Millennium Edition when I arrived at the trust, and it's evolved over time to now where we are fully embedded in Teams, in the use of all the Office 365 suite, and I suppose it put us in a really good position for when lockdown struck, and probably a position which enabled us to then support other schools. Because we've been using it for so long, we've already, we already used it as a teaching tool and as a collaboration tool. When lockdown struck, we were able to just completely transition into a virtual world, and the only element we really added to lessons was the video element, the bit that was missing. So in terms of the approaches we've taken, it's really the use of IT to support children. Now, I know that can be said by anyone using IT, but I think the use of technology by not only the children in accessing the work, but by the teacher delivering work. And I'm sure throughout this session this afternoon, we can show all those elements of how we've adopted IT and the sort of approach we're taking, and we'll show it in demos and things like that.
Great. And what about staff training and getting staff confident using Microsoft 365? Are there any challenges there? Are there any approaches you've used which work?
I think, Dan, some of the issues we faced are around, like everyone was facing at the time, that disparate kind of spread out nature of staff, the very variable level of staff confidence and competence with use of the technology. And something that we found really invaluable was to be able to use Teams meetings and live events to train staff, to be able to do live Q&A with them, to be able to harvest examples on the fly and screenshots and things like that, and to record all of that. Might I be able to screen share for a moment? Would that be okay?
Yes, please.
Let's do that. And then I think because that hopefully gives some context to what we're discussing. There we go. So let's have a look for a minute. If I just go into Stream, obviously doing all of our training through Teams live events and Teams meetings with staff meant we could take the recordings, they go straight into Stream. And just as an example, in the same way that teachers were delivering live lessons through Teams meetings that we recorded and made available, which I know Dave will pick up on a bit later, to be able to do staff training that way and give staff access to that, kind of the power of that knowledge straight back again, is really handy. So here's a training session that was run, that I ran. It's a live event, you can see from the layout, and being dropped into Stream means I've got the transcript of it automatically put together, as well as the live captions that we can use. This one was around music, so if I just type notation, then immediately it lets us search. So, I mean, for learners, this is incredibly powerful, because if there's a fractions lesson, I can search denominator and jump to the point where the teacher talked about it. But for staff training as well, we found this really powerful, because people could jump straight to the information they needed and access it through the transcript, but based on the captions, and a really lovely way to be able to harvest that, again, by being able to drop forms links into a recording. This one obviously is not going to be particularly relevant, but it means we can then harvest understanding and check staff retention of that information by asking them just to respond to forms at midpoints throughout the recordings. That kind of use case for us has been really powerful in getting staff up to speed and feeling confident.
Right, because of course we're all learners, aren't we? Not just students, but also members of staff. And what's interesting there is I can see you're using the tools that you might use in the classroom to help with CPD for teachers, and you're, as you say, you're putting forms in the middle of those videos to make sure that folks are understanding what's happening halfway through.
Yeah, and very easy to do and very easy to teach teachers to do, I think, because it's all in Teams, all in Office together, isn't it?
Now, one of the concerns, I suppose, about moving to a well-developed ICT strategy, using something like 365, is that it's going to take teachers time for them to learn all these new skills, and there's a concern about the time taken to do that. But looking on the other side of that, have you seen any ways that perhaps Office 365 has saved teachers time?
Yeah, massively so. And I think when we went into this sort of transition into lockdown and then into blended learning, the need for staff to be trained up went up massively. And so we found ourselves putting on training sessions on a weekly basis, and actually because Teams itself was updating so regularly, I think Microsoft realized the need to try and add new features to make it more accessible for teachers to work from. And Office 365 again, the need grew even more. So we were having to run training sessions, even daily at some point, to make sure staff were up to speed. Now, like I said, we've been using Office 365 for quite a while. and in particular Onenote. And through Onenote, we have asked teachers to use the Onenote. We've structured it in such a way that we, I think Ant might demo this as well, that we've actually put it into we've split the year down into terms, and then into weeks, and then into days. And we have asked teachers to use this structure not only as their delivery tool for lessons, to put resources into OneNote for children to access for questions and forms and everything to be put in there, videos to support the lesson. We've asked the teachers to use this as their planning tool. So actually, teachers will use this 2 weeks in advance. They'll populate the OneNote on the days with the titles of the lessons, with all the questions, with all the resources, and so it becomes a planning tool. And then that way, teachers can work collaboratively, because using through Teams, using OneNote, a collaboration tool. Now, because of the structure of our MAT, we've our year groups operate across all the 4 schools. So whatever year 3 are doing in one school, you can go into one of our other schools and they'll be doing the same thing. The teachers will plan across the trust and within their own year group within their school, but they'll utilize the collaboration tools to plan together. That way, you don't all have to be planning the same lesson. That's not 4 people in 4 schools planning the same lesson. That's one person planning one lesson across the trust. The team teaching element, where a teacher in one school can actually teach the children across the trust, either via webcam to children at home or to children in classes, has meant that has freed up time for teachers. So what we've been trying to do is reduce the workload on teachers, reduce the amount of time they're spending planning, and then the time they're saving, they can utilize that time to either create amazing resources to really give children the best opportunities in class, or to then focus their time on training and upskilling, and they've got time to do other things other than the boring paperwork side of teaching. We want them to be with children doing some fun things, and if they're not, they're doing something meaningful.
Yeah, and it strikes me that that's one of the keys, I think, for your school, is the amount of collaboration that happens between your teachers. Obviously, it's a primary school model, so you can do certain things you wouldn't be able to do in a secondary, like, for example, allow pretty much all teachers to be able to see what's happening in individual classes if they wanted to, so that you can swap between here and there, and perhaps a year 2 teacher can see what's happening in year 3 and help with the transition between those, because of course sometimes you go forwards and sometimes you have to go back round again as well to pick things up. So that's something that's always very much struck me, and I think even when you kind of do physical classroom teaching, you have these kind of large breakout areas as well, where you might have 2 or 3 teachers in that room with a larger class, and sometimes that's quite helpful as well in terms of team teaching. And I can see that that's analogous with what you're doing in 365 as well. But what about students, and in particular the experience of younger students? Because you could hear the argument, oh yes, but they're only little, they won't be able to use Teams, they won't be able to use Class Notebook, they can't use SharePoint. Is that the experience you've had for your younger students?
It's not, actually, and I think, as the reason why people won't want to teach the younger children using all these tools, or even encouraging the children to use these tools, is through fear of not being able to meet objectives or for them to achieve. And the truth is, the fear lies with us as practitioners, us as teachers. It's not the fear of the children. Children aren't fearful of technology at all. If anything, they have grown up as a generation now of children that are using technology on a daily basis. They are using iPads and iPhones in restaurants to keep them busy from a very young age.
Yeah.
And so by the time they hit 4 or 5 and they're in school, they're actually quite intuitive when it comes to technology. And we have found that actually by teaching them how to use the technology appropriately, they are beginning to learn those basic skills. Now, obviously, when it comes to creating a OneNote page filled with resources, the text in those resources needs to be suitable for either children to access or for their parents to access and help them. And we found that during lockdown, parents were able to help because we made it as simple as possible. Ant, did you have anything to add to that? Because I know that you've done a lot of research into those sort of early years.
No, I think exactly as you've said, Dave, it is about that confidence building, isn't it? And again, if I might just share my screen a moment just to revise what Dave was talking about, that continuity is what really pays dividends. And we found over time how useful that's been, certainly in the last year, that by having a similar structure to our teams and our notebooks right from the early years upwards means that children become very comfortable and confident, in school or at home with the system in place. So if they know that when they go to their class team, they're going to see the subject channels to do with everything they learn about, and that they can comment on that at any point, when they're on a device, whether it's live in the lesson or when they feel like talking about it later. And they know when they go to their class notebook that it's going to be split up into the terms, and then the weeks of the terms, and then the days of the week, and they'll find the lessons of the day in the right order. That's really powerful, because by even our nursery staff modeling this on the board in the early years, it may just have a what's happening today and a picture of what's for lunch, but it gradually teaches those children that this is how I access my learning. And as we release that control to make them more independent, more confident, and have more ownership as they move up through the school, that, like the trauma for early years teachers of teaching children about password management, it's the same thing for us. As they come up, they become very competent, very confident, and very independent. And we've seen that resilience in them in learning remotely at home or in school, or there are many transitions between those two that we've had recently, because they understand that there's very little friction between what happens to be learning at school and what happens to be learning when they're not in school. With something like the Teams and OneNote model really gives us power in crafting a curriculum offer that doesn't have much friction in the change. It's very fluid and very similar, no matter where learners are.
And I guess that will be impacted by perhaps the devices you use as well, the devices you use in the classroom, and then maybe the devices that students or parents have at home.
I think to some extent, I think with Office, it's one of those systems that's fairly device agnostic, isn't it? And that's one of the big wins for us. We've been invested in Microsoft, as Dave said, for a long time, in terms of using their devices and their technology. But it is now that, I'm showing you the class notebook now. I know when I model this to learners that it will look the same no matter whether they're looking back, whether they're looking at OneNote on a MacBook or a Chromebook or an iPad or an Android tablet or a PC, or the browser on their games console or the smart telly in the lounge. It will look the same. And that's one of the critical things for us, that what teachers are modeling looks the same for learners no matter what they're doing. The big caveat for our teachers is they have to be mindful that if children are accessing it on mum's mobile phone, that they need to really zoom in on the learning on the page to make sure that children can see what's being modeled by the teacher. But that aside, it does give us something that is very compatible with whatever children have access to, regardless of what devices you invest in as a school in school.
Great.
And what was the reaction from parents when you went into lockdown and people had to use these tools from home, maybe for the first time in anger? Maybe I'm not sure if you sort of used them previously before lockdown to get not everybody was as prepared maybe, but I just wonder what the reactions were, and if people did have issues logging in, or did they have their own devices?
I think we've had, for a long time, we've run a very proactive campaign with parents to help them understand not just how to use the technology that we use in school, but how to the pedagogy and the thinking behind why we use it with children. I'll let Dave pick up and talk on that while I just sort of show you the site that we put in place to help with that, because I know Dave will want to.
Oh, yeah, I'd love to. Going into lockdown, I think we were given something like 2 days notice, and we just wanted to, if anything, in those 2 days, prepare ourselves as much as possible, and if anything, provide children with a consistent approach to teaching. Whatever they get in school, we wanted to try and replicate as much as we could for them at home. Now, because we have, invested in technology over the years, we have got quite a few devices in school. We run a one-to-one program for the majority of the school, and so when it came to the lockdown, what we did was we did a very quick turnaround and sign out of our devices to parents. So any parent at home not with a device, they had the option of signing one out from school, and so they could get access from home. That was the first thing we did, and that signing out 500 devices across the trust was no mean feat, believe me. The other thing we did was set up within 2 days this website that Ant is showing you, and again we had a whole team of about 15 people producing resources that allow parents to, what we didn't want is to be bombarded with hundreds of people saying, how do I do this, how do I log on, how do I get that. We wanted to give them everything they needed all in one easy to access place. So we created this website, and so help guides for parents, links to all the resources that we provide as a trust, but also we set up a help desk, and it is you can create a support ticket. My Surface doesn't work, or I can't log in, whatever it is. You send that message, it gets triaged by one of our team that we're all working from home at that point. So this is all done remotely. And then we were then able to then remote into their device using this piece of software and correct the mistake, sort out whatever the issue was with them online watching it, so they could learn at the same time how to solve the problem if it ever happened again. And because of that system in place, we found that actually the number of issues was limited massively, and so we didn't really have that much of a backlash from parents, amazingly.
So how are you measuring the success of the user adoption? What approaches are you using to measure whether teachers are using everything successfully, and also to measure the student engagement?
Well, if I kick off with teacher engagement, first of all, we have done, I suppose, every school will do lesson observations, and they will, monitor their teachers and what the teachers are doing. Now, we do it in a way that is very supportive of teachers, and essentially a member of the leadership team is paired up, buddied up with a year group for 4 weeks, and in those 4 weeks, it's a case of finding out what's going well, what needs to be improved, and working with the teachers to improve over that period of time. We set targets to the teachers, they work on it. So during that process, usually it's done in person. Usually a member of the leadership team will go from site to site and do it all. But during this time, it was not possible. So we did it all remotely. So we were able to meet via Teams. We were able to observe lessons, because, as Ant has already said, we recorded all the lessons that were taught. So we were able to go and watch back any lessons. We were able to meet with pupils and actually say, how was today's lesson? Talk to us about what's going on there. And through that process, we were able to monitor and give feedback on the use of all of these products. We're able to go and see the OneNotes because they're all readily available, and see if they are pre-populated with plans and resources. We were able to just make sure that everything, and to be honest, our staff are all so good anyway, because this was not new to them. They all, as we are, they're all vested in making sure that that all this works and is providing the best for the children. So they were keen to make sure everything was up and running. And I'll let Ant explain how we managed to track the children, during this time as well.
Oh, great.
Thanks, Dave. So I think for us, Teams is everything is the short answer on this. With a platform such as that, where you have the analytics data, and we really managed to properly spend time getting to grips with what does it turf out, what does it mean, how can we use that in a way that allows teachers to check attendance, to check engagement, to see who's responding to assignments and in what timely fashion they're doing that. Through use of assignments, we've again reducing that friction for learners by having something where all the document management of setting some assignments and having them handed back in, being able to mark and feedback and use things like rubrics to respond in a way that's really constructive and meaningful for learners, meant that we then, all of that analytics data as well as the assignments data was at teachers' fingertips, and really supports them in making sure they have a really clear picture of what children are succeeding, what children are floundering, which ones are not attending, or are attending but not really engaging with the learning, and putting that plan together of these group of children we need to be engaging on more on a one-to-one level. These are the children that we need to be talking to outside of the normal Teams lesson calls and things like that, so to really help keep them motivated. And for us, a big part of this was maintaining the idea of the community of the organisation and the school for every child, when so many of them were remote, and gradually that possibility of demotivation and feeling isolated, and all the valid concerns that we had about mental health, and finding that we could really keep that model of what it is to be part of your school and engaged with your school and talking to your teacher and your classmates. This was something that we could really monitor actively through Teams, assignments and analytics as well.
What sort of tools are you using for that? And is it the Insights tool that Microsoft provide for?
Yeah, absolutely.
Leaders?
I think so. Insights is the big one at the moment. I know there's lots of things that they're working on to sort of enhance that experience, but Insights for us was very helpful. In terms of, as I said, knowing who was attending and being able to really clearly picture when did they join the lesson, how long did they stay on the lesson. As I say, the engagement factor as well of who's completed the assignment, who's not started it yet. By using Microsoft Forms extensively, we found that we were able to, like I did before, have things dropped into the middle of a video to see, have children's responses as part of that. So if they're attending, live, that's great. If they're watching the lesson asynchronously later, and dropping, the same form that you might use live in the lesson and dropped into a OneNote page or into a Sway or into, a document, dropping it into the recording of the lesson in Sway, that again, you might have pasted into OneNote or something like that, to make all this central location for learners. Putting those forms in means it's really easy for teachers then to access the responses of children. And it's all of those things together. We've reached the point where we realized it takes all of those tools and a teacher who is comfortable bringing those things together to help really engage and excite and motivate children when they're learning in a blended way.
Yeah, so it's clear, as you say, Teams is very much the center of it all, and it's a great platform to engage people into whatever activity they're doing, whether that's learning or working for school business purposes. But it's also clear that there are lots of other services available through Microsoft 365. You mentioned Forms, Sway, we saw Stream earlier, SharePoint, of course, OneNote and the class notebook. And I guess the trick is perhaps having a strategy that allows teachers to know what to use for different things?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, very much so. And I think that's where hopefully we are aspiring to be, and that's the direction we're moving in, is to empower our teachers so that they feel comfortable with that range of different tools and knowing which one is the right time at that time to use with learners. If you're happy again, I would quite like to, it's interesting as you mentioned SharePoint, I'd really like to just show you what we're doing with SharePoint at the moment. Here is our homepage for SharePoint, and it's put together obviously by yourselves in terms of the architecture of it. So things like the mega menu here that allows us to really take what is a massive structure, although as Dave said, we're a very small multi-academy trust, the structure of that actually can be unwieldy. And what you've helped us craft, crafted for us and helped us to define is something where teachers and learners can access what they need very easily, no matter what device they're on, through an app or through the browser, and get to the content they need. So by being able to have this trust level view that teachers can see, where they can get to all of the faculty and subject resources that link to the SharePoint site, but also the team, as well as the internal teams that are more to do with procedural things, means that it's very easy to have, as I said, that school community, because that's the backbone behind this, isn't it? It's trying to craft something where all the staff and all of the learners feel that they have this one united place that may be virtual, and it may be that they're not physically there at the time, but they can access it. So this sort of tool that, as I say, that you've kind of put together for us, that means that we can make it really easy for everybody to find what they need. It is a very powerful way of supporting both teachers and pupils. And I know if I go into something like a subject site here, so the way I would have got to that then would be, there we go, through the mega menu and going straight to the art faculty. This is replicated across all of our subjects as examples. Here it means that we've got everything in one place, and when you access this as a teacher, you have access to the latest news in your subject, to the subject lead, to the policy document, to the recommended websites that are useful to you, to recent CPD. And this is something else that's been really helpful for us. As I showed you the music one earlier, this is a great way that we can pump that investment into training back into staff by allowing them to access this content in a really easy to find way. So, this, for example, this demonstration lesson that Chloe Farrant, our art lead, did, or this event here, teachers can access the recordings of that very easily as they need it.
What I like about
sorry, Dan, but we wanted it to be a one-stop place for every teacher to go to, every member of staff, every child to go to. So this is now the homepage for everyone when they open up an internet browser, and then from here they can access everything. And one thing that was putting us off ever going down this route was clunkiness, was the sort of the not attractive looking format of a SharePoint site. This is really eye-catching. It's somewhere nice that teachers want to go or staff want to go and access. Children want to and find it very easy to navigate around. It's for us, this is the next step forward in making sure that teachers have access and staff and children have access to everything.
That's great. I was going to say, David, that one of the things that I find really interesting about what you've done is the rolled up nature of all this, because of course we've built individual areas for all the different schools. They've got their own classes and so on, but you've really kind of rolled things up. So for example, those faculty sites, the resource sites, the subject sites, if you like, sometimes those would be in individual schools, and each school would have their own set of resources. But you've shared, haven't you? Sharing is caring, and you really have shared all that stuff up.
Yeah, and I think that's the beauty of and the efficiencies of working as a multi-academy trust. We wanted a trust level site that went across all the schools, and I suppose what we're trying to create one school with 4 campuses, and that way it just means that you can bring together those economies of scale and make things work so much more efficiently and effectively. And this here is a way of bringing it all together across the trust, a one-stop shop for everyone to go to and access everything.
Brilliant. And I've got another thing for you to think about. We haven't had a chance to talk about this yet, but one of the things that you can now do is you can actually basically take your SharePoint intranet, if you like, and you can put it right into the heart of Teams, so it becomes a button in Teams for everybody. A thing called Viva Connect. Nobody knows why. So is that something you'd potentially be interested in doing as well? So you have a nice button at the top there that says Cornerstone intranet, or?
Oh, completely. I mean, it's now, lots of the third-party softwares we're working with now they're all bringing out their Teams integration tools, and if anything, Teams should be the place that everyone goes to. And if it is, and we can access more from Teams, brilliant. It just means one less click of the mouse, doesn't it? That's
great. I think maybe we'll ask Lloyd to show that in our demo in a bit, so you can see what it looks like. But it's a lovely thing. Yeah, that's great, guys. That's all the questions I had to ask you today. Thank you. It's been so nice to get your feedback, but also to see what you're doing, to actually see the visuals of what this looks like for teachers and students.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having us on. And I suppose, if I could just finish by doing a little bit of a plug for the EdTech Demonstrator program that the second year has just been launched. So all across the country, there's about 48 EdTech demonstrators just waiting to support schools in moving things forward. So, please Google EdTech Demonstrator and or Bing EdTech Demonstrator, and if anything, get in touch, because there's lots of support, lots of CPD, lots of free support and CPD on offer that we will be able to provide schools and help out.
That's great. Will you give us a link to that, and we'll include that in any communications we send out to do with this webinar, David?
Lovely, will do.
Brilliant. Tony, back to you. Just to review the benefits, I suppose.
Yep. So I think we're running out of time for doing our sort of full demo. Lloyd, maybe you can give us a quick whiz of a quick look at Viva Connections inside Teams and how that can bring SharePoint into Teams.
Sure. Yeah.
But I think we'll keep it fairly light on the demo because we're running out of time. But these are some of the benefits that I know that we've spoke quite a bit about in the demonstrations today so far. And I think just sort of taking a step back, definitely some of those benefits of using Teams, other than other third-party products, or actually people that maybe worry about using Teams, that actually there's a huge amount of benefits in terms of safeguarding. And this was something that we didn't really talk much about, Ant and James. I don't know what your thoughts are in terms of keeping children safe on the internet and using Microsoft Teams. From our perspective, it's one of those things where actually Teams is that walled garden where you can have those conversations in that safe environment. Have you come across any problems in terms of safeguarding? Are there any other products that you use to keep children safe when they're using Teams and Office 365?
I think what you've said there about that walled garden approach is most poignant, because we have found, and I know teachers in general will say this, I'm sure, that the most powerful lesson is the one that's real, not artificial. And so when children type something in a conversation and it's misinterpreted or comes across ambiguously and they upset their friend by the nature of what they typed or how their friend read it, then that is the most powerful lesson to take apart and talk to them about how to be careful in the way that they interact and communicate online. So in the same way that we used to use something like Yammer very much for that, again within Office, now we're finding Teams is again very powerful for allowing teachers and pupils to interact in that way. As I said, by having channels in your team for different subjects, it means that that children can communicate about their learning whenever they feel like it, and have the back channel on the classroom, not just when the live event is the live lesson is going on. And I think that's really powerful for supporting online safety in the way that learners can really try out and experiment with online chat and communication and sharing of work and sharing of their screen and that kind of thing.
And I guess if you've got schools that may be worried about that and they turn off these features, you're potentially pushing children onto other products that are out of the scope of the school, such as WhatsApp and other third-party products that they might use, or Facebook, that you just can't keep an eye on. You can't have those grown-up conversations with them.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And so we didn't turn off any of those sort of features. What we did was we monitored them. We the staff were part of the children's chat area, and if anything, we didn't want the children, that they needed the chat, especially during a lockdown where they didn't have the playtimes and the social aspect of life. What we wanted them to do is still, you know, have that. We wanted to replicate a normal school day, so we gave them opportunities to have playground chat. So we set up a whole chat which was just the Year 3 playground chat, where they could go on and send emojis to each other and write all the silly stuff. Now, obviously, the staff were on duty, so they were on the playground chat, watching the chat, making sure that children were being safe and behaved, as you would do if they were in school. We use another product called eSafe, which tracks what is happening on the computer, and keystrokes of the keyboard, etc., which was a really big help for monitoring children's actions on school computers. Bit more tricky when they were using their home devices, but that's where education comes into play. And sad to say that out of all of our webinars that we ran over the last year, the most popular was how to use PowerPoint. And so I think teachers love that one. But the least attended, and this is really quite disturbing, but the least attended was how to keep your children safe online, which, you know, I think it should be the other way around, if anything.
Yeah, I really like the idea of the playground, because I think that's one thing that really affected the well-being of a lot of children during lockdown, not having the ability to talk to their friends. And if you turn off that feature in Teams, you're stopping them from having those conversations that they would have had in the classroom anyway, potentially, or monitored in the playground. So that's really good. So I guess we'll move on to a really short demo from Lloyd now. I don't know if you want to give us a quick overview of Teams, Lloyd, and just a few of the basics, maybe preview the Viva Connections as well.
Yep, sure. I'll just share my screen so we can get that set up. So can you see that okay? Has that come up yet?
Yeah, that's working.
Yep, great. So if I just go to Teams for a second, so I'll start by going over the Viva Connections. I know we've mentioned that already, and it'll be good to see that within Teams. So this is quite a new feature that has come for Teams, and it's just a way of, again, how you can actually integrate SharePoint into Teams. So talking about how it's easy to access everything in one shop, so now you can even access your SharePoint sites. So what the Viva Connections is, you can actually add a tab and customize this, so you can have your own icon on the left hand side and name this, and maybe some of the different schools, maybe the trust level, whichever SharePoint site you want to set as a home page for this level. You can even actually have multiple at the same time as well, so you can manage that within the Teams admin. But as you can see, instead of just using the browser to access SharePoint, you could be accessing this via your own Teams desktop application as well. So that means you can just go to one app if that's on a laptop or your mobile phone, and then access SharePoint and all of your Teams. So you can see the SharePoint site. This is our demo site. It does look a bit similar to the Cornerstone one was looking at earlier with the mega menu, but you can see that does just fit nicely into Teams, and still we can access all of those SharePoint sites and, you know, all of the Teams as well, which will actually link to those long-term resource areas just within this one application. So if I go to Teams now as well, I know we've spoke quite a lot about benefits already and some really good examples of how Cornerstone have been using Teams and all the other apps within Office 365. But I thought I'd just try and put a little bit of a spin on it and show you how you can actually maybe start with Teams. And instead of seeing the potential and where you can reach with Teams. So what I'll do is I'll just go to a quick Year 6 team that we've got. We have actually added some channels before, so we saw that how they've really used channels really well, and it makes it really easy for students to get used to finding resources over the years of being at the school, so they know exactly where to go to access all of the different work and all of the different topics as well, which is can be set up by the teachers.
Those channels look very pretty as well, Lloyd.
Yeah, so we've added some icons for these ones, just to make them stand out a little bit more. So we've got some from music as well, comments by the students that have been added in, and the emojis on each of the messages as well that that you get within Teams. And one of the other things, just talking about consistency and making it really simple for students to access the resources in the same place. So one of the things that we do and as part of our product is adding the tabs to each of the class teams as well. So this is where you can actually access all of those documents from the Sharepoint sites and the subject areas. So if I was to go to resources at the top, no matter which class team I would be in, I can always access the resources that I need. So you can see for this example, we've got some different folders that the teachers have added into this Year 6 area, and we can go back and access, revision resources, home learning as well, and some of the other different topics that we've been studying here.
So this might be handy, Lloyd, if let's say you had 2 Year 6 classes, or two reception classes, or 3 Year 2 classes, depending on the size of your school. All 3 of those classes would connect into the same bank of permanent resources.
Yep, exactly. Just talking about sharing is caring, going back to that example of how you can put everything in one place, and again making it much easier and more efficient, rather than having multiple SharePoint sites, and basically where you'd be storing the same content, but this way you can just use one site and everyone can use one version of the truth, which makes it much easier to access. Just adding that as well, I know we've talked about assignments a little bit, but one demo I was just going to show you how we can actually access those resources was just looking at. So if I just go back to that tab, and maybe if we wanted to go into the home learning area, maybe some of the documents that we've got in there, and actually create an assignment, and how we can do that and use those files. So in the assignments, if I was actually creating a new one as a teacher, where we've got the resources option, this is where now we can use the benefits of Teams and storing documents in those other subject areas. So if I was to go to Year 6 and find all of my documents that we've been storing there, I've got quite a few in here, but once I'm in the Year 6 area, we can now find any of those student resources and anything from home learning or anything else that we want to then set as an assignment and send out to the students from there.
Anton, David, did you find that you were using the assignments feature across the entire school, or was it mainly the older kids for the assessed work? How did you set your sort of homework? Was it always through assignments, or did some teachers post them as messages in the conversation channel? Did you have sort of a set way of doing it as a trust, or was it fairly flexible?
To begin with, it was because not everyone was so familiar with assignments. It was a bit of a mix, a blend of that. But come the end, it became an expectation that all pieces of work would be set by assignments, just because of the tracking nature of it, being able to see who was engaging, and through the assignment tools, the new features were coming out constantly with the whole self-marking rubric systems that teachers were becoming more and more familiar with, and therefore were able to self-mark, and so, or make marking a lot easier, which reduced teacher workload, and the assignments was they were just I forgot what I was going to say now. Ant, you must have something.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Dave. I think you hit it on the head. And I think also with the whole Office, the M365 offer, you've got different ways in, and that's something that I know as an EdTech demonstrator school, we found schools really appreciate. That, for example, we run a very project-based curriculum, so there's times when an assignment with a finished piece of work and a deadline is absolutely the best way to go. There's also times when you want to back and forth with the children, with your students, and submit a draft and then check it and give feedback on it. And by using OneNote for that, either by working on the page or using the device camera to screenshot real work into it, it meant that children and teachers could leave scribbled notes on the page. They could highlight and annotate with different comments. They could leave an audio recording for each other in that way, straight in OneNote. They could have a small table with tick boxes of success criteria, all sorts of ways that teachers and students could interact over a piece of work before it got to the point of an assignment. And I think, as we were talking about earlier, with that rich media offer of being able to embed so many different types of content in your learning platform, we found something like Flipgrid that we haven't even talked about yet embedded really nicely, and it meant that we could ask for children to submit work that they were submitting by either recording their webcam and talking back to the teacher and presenting their learning, or by recording their desktop and modeling the piece of work that they've learned through that way. So a huge amount of variety in the way that, again, just by upskilling the teachers to feel confident with these half a dozen different ways to engage their students, meant that teachers could really go wild and make sure that the different ways that learners could feedback their learning was, first of all, fit for the activity rather than shoehorned in by the constraints of the technology, and secondly, differentiated for the specific needs of each learner.
Great.
There's a lot to be said about using video. I mean, Flipgrid is great. My son, for example, he enjoys recording himself, and that goes into the Flipgrid, and that's the evidence of his learning. He's less keen to do handwriting, and that's fine because you've got different modes of usage.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so we're sort of coming to the end of our time now, so I'm probably just going to have to cut that short, and I'll share across our contact details on the screen now. So we can open it up to any questions. If anyone has any questions, feel free to type them in the question and answer box. I don't know, Darren or Lloyd, have you got any questions that you wanted to finish up with for Ant and David?
I think we've covered all the ground today, to be honest. I mean, what's clear is that Cornerstone over the years has been preparing for this. So, when lockdown happened, you guys were ready because you'd been working on things like Class Notebook for years, and then Class Notebook kind of became Teams, and Class Notebook became part of Teams. And I remember that was a bit of a shift for us, but it did work well, obviously. And I think that put you in a good position. Now that hopefully there's some kind of normality returning, I suppose the question is, how do you deliver blended learning in a world now where you may occasionally have to send a year group home or a class home, or touch wood, nobody has to go home. Everybody can stay in school and be healthy and happy. But you still want to continue using the technology that really took off during the pandemic.
Yeah. Well, we never intended to end up in a situation where what we were doing would end up being so beneficial. I don't think it wasn't ever. We weren't preparing for this sort of event. We were just trying to get the best out of technology to support children in their learning, and that was the be all and end all for us. Of course, it helped us massively in the transition, and so moving forward, we've learned loads about how we use technology, what's the best ways of using technology, and now we're going to take those best bits and use them going forward. So in terms of blended learning, we would teach the children in class in person, we would record the lesson and present that lesson live to children working at home. And what we found is that every lesson now, from now on moving forward, we are going to record, whether there are children at home logged in watching from home, or whether they are at home. We have found it such a great resource to be able to draw upon your previous lessons, to watch again, to revise, to just go through it because there was a misunderstanding. Well, whatever the reason, even at home with your parents, now they have now they know their way around our setup. They can go in and see what the children have been learning and sit with their children and work with them at home. It's I think there are so many benefits that have come out of it that we are going to look to still use, and that's just the teaching side of it. There's the back office side, there's the collaboration side that also has just been ramped up massively, and we're going to continue to do that.
That's great.
Great. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Anton, David. It's been really useful, and I think everyone who watches this will definitely get some inspiration from it, whether they're primary school, the trust, the teacher. I think there's lots of things to learn there. So thank you very much for sharing your demo, sharing your thoughts, and answering all of our questions today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us.
Absolute pleasure. Yeah.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you, Lloyd and Darren, for asking the questions and doing the demonstration. I've got our contact details on the screen, so if you did want to contact us, find out more about what we do, our website, email address and phone numbers on the screen. Also, if you've got a camera phone, you can also point your camera at the QR codes at the bottom to take you to our Twitter page, sign up to our newsletter. Lots of free guides and tips there, useful topics. Our YouTube channel, lots of video guides, how-to guides on there, and our Facebook community where teachers can share resources and share thoughts on remote learning. So thank you everyone for joining us today. That was really useful. And like I say, our contact details on the screen. We'll also send around the details of the DFE EdgeTech demonstrator program that Cornerstone are running as well. So you've got all that. We'll follow that up with an email. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.